As you're working on that, I want to show you what I'm writing as I reflect back on what God has taught me in the past. One of the biggest impacts that Bible journaling has had on me is looking back and just reminding myself of what I know about God's character, which helps me to say yes to Him in obedience when He asks me to do hard things. I specifically remember a time back in 2016 when our pastor challenged us one Sunday morning to say yes to God before we knew what He was going to ask of us. To remind myself of the commitment that I made when I said yes to God, I journaled this entry in my Bible. Several months later, I was listening to an online sermon that pointed out the responsibility of parents to help their children fulfill the tasks to which God calls them. And I was reminded of my yes to God that I had journaled earlier. And when I made a new commitment then, and I wrote it out on my little prayer ring that I keep handy, I wrote, I want to help my children discover their spiritual gifts and the will of God specifically for them and function in that capacity for God's glory. I never expected what God had in mind. Later that week, my 14-year-old daughter Lindsay approached me, and she told me that she felt God was pressing on her heart to do what she could to raise awareness and funds to support the rescue of girls from human trafficking. After prayer and thought, she was coming to me with an idea for her to walk to Nashville, Tennessee, Home of Hope for Justice, an organization that rescues and rehabilitates victims of human trafficking. I knew immediately that this is what God was asking of me, to facilitate Lindsay in the task God had called her to. But I still had 5 kids at home, and Nashville was 300 miles away. The logistics of keeping her and the rest of my children safe, fed, and lodged while all managing all the public relations and social media aspects of Lindsay's journey was mind-boggling and exhausting. But God held me up and demonstrated His faithfulness every single day of the trip, and He did it in such a creative way. Ever since I was 12, a special symbol between God and I has been the 4-leaf clover. And on that trek to Nashville, we were walking for 27 days, and I found exactly 27 4-leaf clovers, one for each day. I was desperately clinging to Him for wisdom and strength. As we went along then, I collected those special clovers in my Bible, along with notes of God's faithfulness in everyday circumstances that we were dealing with. Little did I know how much my future self would need those reminders. When Lindsay crossed the finish line in Nashville, with Natalie Grant surprising her and walking the last mile with her, Lindsay immediately asked God what He wanted her to do next. Then, after much prayer and counsel, she decided to start training to ride her bike across the United States from Mexico to Canada. If I had known what it would take to accomplish it, I don't think I would have agreed to it. But God has His way. I remember one day in particular, a little over halfway into our 6-week-long trek, and I was absolutely exhausted, physically, mentally, and emotionally, from all the responsibility and challenges I faced as the lone adult with 4 teens biking the U.S. I couldn't go anymore. I was just done. And for a short time, we were on a paved bike trail, so I got on a bike to ride alone, and I cried out to God in desperation. I prayed for Him to remind me of His faithfulness and take away my fear of the unknowns that lie ahead. And as I begged for a reminder of His presence, I got off my bike by a little creek, and there near the edge was a 4-leaf clover just waiting for me. Like a flood, I remembered all the notes I had made in my Bible the year before, as God had walked with me so faithfully. And those concrete expressions about His character kept me going that day and many days since. I learned so many things on that journey across America, but the most significant was discovering God's faithfulness in a new way. I now know that I can trust Him because of what He taught me through that very difficult endeavor. Bible journaling is just divinely therapeutic. It's supernaturally beneficial to keep you focused on the truth God's showing you now and to build your faith when you review the things that God's taught you. It's so easy for us to forget the things we know. And it's important for us to keep a record of what our heart needs to remember. Always make sure you date your entry so you have a point of reference when you come back and review the things in the story that God is writing in you. I want to show you now what to do whenever you get done with your finished bookmarks. I have a different one done here that I have stuck in my Bible with just using regular school glue, and I just press it in there, and I highlighted the verse that goes along with it and added just a little doodle here. And so I wanted to point out that there are some main words that I like to highlight, and it's nice to know some different fonts. So I want to show you this one that I used earlier in the one I was doing during my testimony. And you just use your regular block letters just like you learned in grade school, but then you come back and you add an extra line on the outside or inside of the letter, whichever you want. And then you come back through and add little tick marks. And so it just makes this nice, bold, whimsical font that you can just add interest and make your Bible journaling entries just come alive, make certain words just pop. So it's really simple, and it's nice to be able to have that little tool in your toolbox that you can add to. And I want to show you next how to mark the pages of the places where you journal. I have this little clip. It's just a paper clip that I've stuck a piece of washi tape through, and I just cut out the little notches at the end so it makes it look like a little ribbon. And you can just stick that at the top of your page so that you can find the place. But at the top you have these little tabs that are on your workbook paper, and you can just cut them out, add a little bit of glue to the top of that, and then you stick it to the top of the page wherever you have stuck your worksheet, your little bookmark that you just made. You fold it over the top and press the two sides together so it stays. Now you've got this nice little tab that sticks out the top of your Bible, and you can see exactly where that entry is. And so it just helps to kind of be able to find your place again and be able to come back and review those spots where you've put meaningful things. And so you have those coordinating that go along with whichever bookmark you chose. And so you might want to also stick it in as a tip-in, and a tip-in, it just goes in the valley of your Bible unless you affix it to the outside edge of your page, and then it's called a tip-out. And it's called a tip-out because it tips away. In the event that you don't have a journaling Bible, it creates like a hinge. But I'm going to show you how to use it in the valley as a tip in. And I usually just use like washi tape. But if you don't have washi tape, a Post-it note is about the same stickiness. And so you can cut off the top of that sticky note where it's just the sticky part and kind of improvise with it to use it like washi tape if you don't have any yet. And so you just stick it half on and half off, just like that. And then you lay it on its back so it doesn't adhere to the page yet, and find out, kind of center it, decide where you want it. Then you press it into the valley. And now it's like an extra page in there, sort of, and it doesn't make your Bible fall open to that place because it's just the sticky note down in the valley there. And so you've written on one side, and if you want to write on the other side for extra value, you can. Okay, I'm going to take us back to our slides now, so give me just a minute while I get switched back over.